Hi, Dave from Informed America, reminding you that you don't have to be subject to the two-party system of Republicans and Democrats. Previously, I interviewed Green Party candidate Howie Hawkins, and today I had the pleasure of talking to Constitution Party nominee Don Blankenship. Now, of course, Informed American does not endorse political candidates, but we do like to talk to candidates like Don Blankenship, so you can all be informed Americans about the issues and the choices that are before you. We'll enjoy the interview. Hi, Dave from Informed American here with Don Blankenship, the Constitution Party candidate for president. Don, thanks so much for coming on to have a chat.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Great to have you. All right, so let's just get right into this thing. Don, I was looking at your website, donblankenship.com, if anybody wants to head over there while we're having a chat. And right on the front, Don, it says, quote, "I'm running for office for one reason, to let people know how dire the American situation is and what things must be done to fix it." They're continuing, "We cannot survive as a country if we do not change the behavior of our government led by partisan Republicans and Democrats. We need a third way." Don, what is the third way? What is this dire situation that we're in, and what is this third way?
Well, there's so many elements to the dire situation, it's hard to make it simple, but 27 trillion in debt probably by now is a start. But the bigger chronic problem is corruption in the government and dishonesty and lack of focus on doing what's right for America as opposed to doing what's right for everything but America.
Now, you mentioned that debt. There seems to be no inclination. If anything, we're ramping it up now, aren't we?
Yeah, I don't know where they think they can go with it, but obviously because the U.S. dollar is the world currency, they can get by with that for a while, but if we ever start trading petroleum and other products in other currencies, it could hit us at any time.
Now, presumably this third way is a party like yours, the Constitution Party, for voters to look for something different. I think a common argument, now I also had on Howie Hawkins, who is the Green Party presidential candidate. Now, I know you have many differences with Mr. Hawkins, but I posed the question to him that I want to pose to you, which is the argument that people will say, well, a vote for Don Blankenship is a vote for Joe Biden. In other words, and so right-leaning people should vote Trump if you want to win, if you want to protect your country. A vote for Don any third party basically is sort of a throwaway. And what is your response to that point?
Well, just the opposite is true if you're trying to save the country from what we just talked about. We've elected a Republican or a Democrat as president of the United States for 170 consecutive years. So we see where that has gotten us. And the problem is that it's become a soap opera between the Democrats and Republicans, and they've lost focus on the country. The third way, the key element of the third way is to go back to what made us great to begin with, which is the Constitution, the rule of law, and honesty.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I was researching your platform and spending some time on your site, I noticed that every principle and every major issue of the day where you take a stance, nearly everyone has the Constitution quoted first, and that's sort of where you begin with how you make your decisions on issues of the day. Basically, is to refer back to the Constitution.
Yeah, oddly enough, I think the one thing that most everybody agrees on in a civil society, you have to have the rule of law. And of course, you have to have a foundation for that rule of law, which the Constitution is probably the best instrument for that in the history of mankind. And we've just totally abandoned it. I personally have suffered a violation probably of 6 or 7 of the first 10 human rights that they put in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And so if we don't get back to that foundation and begin to behave as a civilized society, we can't help but continue to deteriorate.
I've heard the notion that people say, obviously it's the supreme law of the land, but it's a bit antiquated. It can't really address the issues of the day. What do you say to that?
Well, I think that the Bible's a lot older than the Constitution, and it's not antiquated either. The principles of the Constitution are there, just like the Ten Commandments. And while there may be reasons from time to time to tweak them based on technology and so forth, the foundation is sound. And it's, again, what made the country great to begin with.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Now, I want to talk about your perspective on the judiciary and specifically the Supreme Court. It seems like every time there's an opening, it's basically a life or death fight for whoever gets appointed. I mean, we're seeing this now with we saw that with Brett Kavanaugh, which was crazy, and now Ruth Bader Ginsburg is seemingly, I guess, hanging on in hopes for Joe Biden to become president or something, so they could have maybe a left-leaning judge replace her. Now, in the argument is essentially, well, leaving, because we're talking about the Constitution and then the judiciary, and it seems to have become something where it doesn't really matter what's necessarily in the Constitution, but rather what 9 life-appointed Supreme Court justices say is in the Constitution. What do you think of that?
Well, I think, unfortunately, that's true. I think it's not just at the Supreme Court level. It's at the federal court level, at the lowest level, the appeals courts and everything. It's a matter of whether you are politically aligned with the judge, or you are of the same race, or you are of the same belief. It's no longer about the Constitution. And my experience, of course, with that has been extensive. And what they do is they always make it ambiguous and subjective as opposed to objective. For example, on the Department of Justice can't withhold evidence that would prove you to be not guilty, but they have that little caveat that says that the judge can rule that it didn't make any difference, that the DOJ didn't do what it was supposed to do. So basically, even though there's a rule that the Department of Justice has to be fair, if they're not fair, then they can rule that it didn't matter. It's that type of ambiguity that's throughout the judicial system that gives these judges the opportunity to be biased in one direction or the other.
So how would we reform that? What would be a starting point for getting things back and maybe pulling back a little bit of this sort of final say power that the judiciary has and the issues that you just addressed?
Again, pulling back the power of the judiciary is different than what I see as needing to be done originally. We supposedly claimed, or at least the Trump administration claimed, that they had passed some judicial reform, but actually it was prison reform. What we need is directly on target with what I was speaking to there earlier. We need to objectify the law so that there's not so much room for the judges to interpret the law. And what else is happening is that the law is basically made by the judiciary through case law, but most court decisions are based on prior decisions, not based on the Constitution or the law. Mm-hmm. It's really it's odd because I've been around a lot of court and legal cases, and most all lawyers, when they make their argument to the court, make the argument based on previous court decisions. They don't make their argument even on the Constitution because they feel like it's not going to win today.
So we need Congress run by Republicans and Democrats to remake the judicial system into more of an originalist position. That's why we need a third way, right?
Yeah, my observation is that I think the Democrats and the Republicans would agree that if the Department of Justice cheats, that it shouldn't be a matter of a judge deciding whether that cheating mattered to the outcome of the case or not. Yeah. There's a lot of things that could be made objective, which would go a long way. Brady violations, Jinx violations, Giglio violations is what they refer to them as. And there are sometimes black and white violations. To give you a prime example, in my case, the Department of Justice Office of Professional Responsibility wrote 90-some pages full of violations by the Department of Justice, but the trial judge ruled that 100 violations of the prosecution process didn't matter, that the outcome of the trial would have been the same anyway. There's no way a judge knows that.
Yeah, how do you know? Yeah, that's predicting the future. It's predicting an alternate universe timeline. You can't do that.
Yeah, I had a prosecution where the prosecutors actually purposely withheld every FBI interview notes, all the FBI interview notes after the indictment, and 100 of them were declared to be what they call exculpatory, which meant would prove your innocence or you're not guilty. And they just ignored it. That type of objectivity would be easy to add to the law and be very important to preventing innocent people from going to prison.
That's a great point. And I don't know how well you followed this, but this sounds a lot like, and I wasn't familiar with your situation, but this sounds a lot like the General Flynn case, which still, despite releasing exculpatory evidence and Brady material in the Department of Justice saying to dismiss the case, the judge just won't budge on it. That sounds a lot. I don't know the extent that you followed that case, but that does seem like an injustice and something in badly need of reform.
Yeah, I followed that case. And my case is probably the best example in recent times of how corrupted the court system is. They sent me to prison for a misdemeanor with 2,400 felons, even though they had no case. So it's unbelievable. Once it's a violation of your free speech, and it's a way that they can violate your free speech. My problem has been criticism of the government, regardless of whether it's Republican or Democratic issue, and the fact that I've angered both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned free speech, so I did have a question on that, so I want to get into that. On the section of your site, it mentions, well, I mean, at basic level, you can't have a free society without free speech, and that certainly includes the free exercise of religion. And that seems to be a focus there on your platform. How does free speech apply to religious liberty? Where is that right? Is that right that we have being violated, and how would a Blankenship, say, administration protect that right?
Well, again, it's funny how it all ties together. Judicial activism and the fact that the courts write law that supersedes, if you will, in real life, the Constitution. And to be specific, in 1964, I believe it was, there was a court case of New York Times versus Sullivan, which had to do with the New York Times exaggerating the police behavior in one of the Martin Luther King marches.
Okay.
And what happened was the Supreme Court eventually ruled that the media could exaggerate or be pretty far off base, but if they were criticizing a, quote, public figure, that the public figure didn't have the same protection under the law that an ordinary citizen had. And I think the court may have meant at that time public figure, meaning publicly elected official. But they've moved that over the years to mean people like myself who have a podium and the money to speak out. And what they can do is they can call you names or criticize you or sit and tell false stories about you, and you can hardly do anything about it under the current law. So they chill your free speech by calling you names or telling lies about you, and that's what they did in the 2018 West Virginia Senate race.
Yeah, and of course, and beyond that, you see this with celebrities, that sort of a thing, and how it gets applied, and you can basically almost say anything you want if they're deemed a public figure. That is interesting. Now, I want to ask, I don't know the extent that you've delved into this issue or not, but it's something I pay attention to on the free speech front, which is a speech on the internet. Basically people using lawful speech kind of getting censored on the internet. There's been a consolidation in big tech companies like Facebook, Twitter, Google, YouTube, and they tend to not like, or they tend to seemingly censor conservative-minded voices. But then you get the argument, well, they're a private company, that kind of thing, they can do what they want. But I would say that the internet is a public square. And if you can't, if the public by and large can't exercise their free speech in a public square, that's sort of to me, that's a violation. I was curious what you think. Is there a role for government to protect, not necessarily from, not restricting what the government can do, but actually can the government do something positively to protect free speech of Americans? What do you think of that?
Well, I think that you were headed down the right track there. The big companies, I don't think it matters whether they're big companies or small companies. They shouldn't be trying to monitor and, if you will, chill free speech or decide what's proper and what's improper. They should be no different than a radio or a telephone. You pick up a telephone, call your neighbors, get on a conference call, say what you want. Something like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, just a bigger medium for that. And while you might want to have some movie-like censorship of R-rated, X-rated, whatever it might be, that prevents people from getting, young people or underage people from being able to access it, you have to pretty well let it go. It's a tough thing because people don't want certain things to be out there in the airways, but by the same token, if you start monitoring what it is and what's right and what's not right, then you're empowering someone to make that decision, and that's the worst decision.
That's Don, that warms my heart, because it's good to see someone like you speaking out against that. That's great. And I think people on the right are kind of waking up to this. And well, because if you don't, there will be nowhere for you to express your opinion. So that was the First Amendment. Don, I want to go to the Second Amendment. As you've seen, unrest all over the country in response to that. Many citizens, particularly last month, gun sales have exploded. People feeling like the government can't protect them and they have to protect themselves. So I'd like to just get your thoughts on gun rights, the Second Amendment, and then maybe think about what would you do about. I'm sure you're seeing all this unrest just like everyone else. What would you do about things like what you're seeing in Portland, where you get going on, I think, 80 or 90 days of unrest?
Yeah, I'll take the first question
Sure.
first, because it's a lot easier than the second question.
Okay.
The first question is that the Constitution says there be no law that abridges your right to have a gun, and it's pretty simple. Until you revise the Constitution, I don't think you can put limitations on gun rights, except if it's an individual that's mentally ill, or someone who has a bad criminal record.
Right.
I've been on both sides of that. I have a stepdaughter that was threatened by a guy who had a gun, and I had to go down and go through the process of making sure he didn't have a gun for a while till he cooled down. So you run into that situation, and I'm not saying there aren't situations like that, but generally speaking, there should be no limitations on the American public's ability to have guns. It's too late for that. There's guns all over the country. The criminals will be the only ones that have guns, as they say. As far as what's going on in Seattle, Portland, and so forth, it's difficult, and it's brought about by the governors and the mayors of those states and cities not using the National Guard and so forth as they should to squash those types of rioting, and it puts the president, whoever it might be, in an awkward position of having to decide whether to call out federal troops or other enforcement officers. But you can't allow people to destroy property and shoot people, kill people. Beat up cops, put people in the hospital and so forth. But you also can't drive up in unmarked vans and start putting people in vans and hauling them off when you don't know whether they're authorities or whether they themselves are rioters. So it's a tough one. I would put tremendous pressure on the states, if I were president, for them to use the National Guard to squash activity like that.
Don, when the framers were trying to put together this country, and they're talking about separation of the federal government and states' rights and that sort of thing, do you think they imagined that a city mayor or governor would basically be on the side of the rioters? You think they planned for that?
Well, what they imagined was that, no, they did not imagine that, but what they imagined was that it would be destruction of another country instead of part of this country. So to some extent, they if you look at it in the pure sense of the way they looked at it, the states were individual countries, and what they did was their business. So we've come a long way from that. But I do think that in this day and age, you can't have people shooting police officers and so forth and nobody doing anything to stop them.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'd like to move on to another topic, which is something I've had my eye on over the past couple of years, and was certainly a big issue in 2016, really on both sides of the aisle, if you count Bernie Sanders, which is trade. What should the U.S. trade policy be? Are you a free trade guy? Are you a fair trade guy, or something else?
I'm a fair trade guy. I use the word when they say that you're a protectionist, that if it means protecting America's sovereignty, protecting American jobs, protecting American benefits, protecting American way of life, that I guess I'm a protectionist.
Yeah.
I think George Washington had it right when he said that, that the United States should have an import tax on goods that cause the cost of that item to be equivalent to what it would cost us to make it. But the big thing that I saw in a microcosm compared to the United States was in West Virginia. West Virginia for years sold trees and coal instead of selling cars and furniture. And that's what you do when you the only thing you're exporting is your commodities and you're importing your finished products. Then you're losing the value-added taxes on every step of that process, and you're losing all the taxes on the payroll. And when you go down to Walmart and buy an item, that item doesn't have any taxes in it for anything from roads to national defense to social services, welfare, whatever. So people misunderstand that number. When you buy something inexpensively or cheaply at Walmart, Target, or whatever, you're not paying the full price of it because you're paying for something that was built on slave labor and provided no value-added taxes along the way.
Well, that's a fantastic point. And just to add on top of that, it doesn't count, say, unemployment benefits that your state has to put out because some jobs get outsourced. In this case, millions to China over the last 20 or so years. And that was where I was going next. What would you do? What would be your plan to maybe prevent outsourcing, or maybe to encourage or incentivize reshoring of manufacturing capacity or things like that, or just simply to diversify economies in the case of, say, West Virginia?
Yeah, I probably should warn you on the front end that I'm a bean counter, so with some tax background and so forth. But what my view is that we will use tariffs or embargoes or different trade regulations in order to change the behavior of countries like North Korea or Iran when they get way out of line. Mm-hmm. But what we could do that would satisfy both the left and the right in many cases is to look at taxes that equalize the opportunity that the manufacturer has. In other words, if you're producing an item in China with $5 a day labor and no environmental controls, no human rights concerns and so forth, the tax on that item should bring it to a point that you could collect money for the social programs and or unemployment benefits and so forth in this country. So you would also use it for, going back to your Green Party friend, he should be in favor of tariffs that have some green basis. Like if someone is producing an item that's polluting in somewhere in Asia, they shouldn't be allowed to sell that product for really low costs in this country, because if you're talking about worldwide pollution, the pollution coming from that item in Asia is just as damaging to Americans as it is if it's produced in America. I could talk about that for a long time, having come out of the coal industry.
No, that's fantastic. This is great stuff. But I do want to hit on, just to maybe close this topic, if we could, is where do you, so I'm getting from you, where are you different from President Trump's approach? Because we saw him throwing tariffs around to whoever he had a problem with. Other than, I understand the calculation of how you calculate the tariff. That's gold. That's great. But besides that, that mechanism, where do you differ from President Trump and his trade war with China and some of his spats with some other countries?
Right.
Go ahead, sorry.
As far as talk, I don't differ with him a whole lot. If you look at a documentary that I did in 2014 that's on my website called Regcession, it's a play off the word, combining of the word regulation and recession, mm-hmm. that we're not in a cyclical recession, but we're in a permanent regcession where we will never recover until we put some pragmatism in our regulations. So I agree with Trump almost all the major issues at the general level, where illegal immigration, at the time debt policy, wasting government, cabinet positions that aren't necessary, environmental regulations, and so forth. The difference is that he's, as you said, he's just here, there, and yonder. He's like a gunslinger that can't hit the target because he just pulls and shoots. What you have to do, again, going back to my bean counter background, is evaluate what the right answer is. And you probably would take 140 countries and classify them into, 6 or 7 groups and set their tax rates. You would probably, do things that would actually figure out how to deal with DACA, as opposed to just saying you're going to deport 6 million people. It's a situation where there are answers, but the Democrats and Republicans don't want an answer. And when Trump gives them the opportunity, they turn it into a mockery and don't really deal with the issue. It becomes television drama.
That's a great point. And that's actually where I was going next, because on the issue, it's the issue of borders. Trade deals with goods coming in, and immigration deals with essentially services, labor, and people coming in. So first question on immigration, do you support a border wall on the southern border?
I support whether it's a border wall or electronic wall, whatever is rightfully and cost effectively can control the borders. I support it, wholeheartedly. I also support that if you're in the country illegally, and you're caught speeding or whatever, that you should be turned over to immigration.
Mhm.
I don't support deporting DACA, dreamers, if they were brought to this country before they were of age, because I think it's just ridiculous. They don't have anywhere to go. You
Right.
got to have somewhere to deport them, and I don't know where you deport them to.
Right.
But actually, the other point I would make about that is a Democratic Party platform, which is to let people come across the border unimpeded, is the worst platform for the great majority of their members. It destroys the opportunity for minimum wage increases. It destroys the tax base for welfare and Social Security. It takes benefits out of the pocket of the elderly and the disabled. And so it's really unfortunate that no one has explained to what I would call the middle to lower income Democratic Party members that the Democratic Party platform is exactly the opposite of what it should be for their purposes.
Yeah, and in fact, when I spoke with candidate Hawkins, the Green Party platform is in fact open borders, and they also find agreement there on the libertarian right as well. Many of those are in favor of open borders, which leads me to overall immigration policy. Besides, we've got DACA and the little things here and there, but I think taking maybe a higher view, how many people do we need in the United States, Don? We've got 325 thereabouts. Do we need 400 million, 500 billion, or million? Do we need a billion people in the United States? Have you given that much thought about should we have just endless population growth, kind of a thing?
Yeah, I haven't given the number a thought, but I would say that if you'd indulge me just a minute, when I was running the big coal company, Massey Energy, we coined the use of the word member in place of employee. And what we did, of course, was we knew that we had to have people that were part of our organization that wanted us to help us achieve the goals, not just come into the country or into the company to make a dollar. And that's where we are in the United States. We need to import a lot of people, but we need to be importing people that really want to be part of the melting pot, want to become part of the American system, appreciate the Constitution, are going to looking for a job where they can benefit us. To do what we've been doing is similar to a company just every morning that shows up to manufacture something, and whoever shows up off the street that morning first gets manufactured. And that's the reason the country's in the shape it's in. We don't have any vetting or any interview process or any review process. So you're not going to get the best people when you just let whoever shows up walk in.
That reminds me of the movie On the Waterfront, where Marlon Brando, you show up and you hope you're the one chosen. That's a good way. It's a good analogy of how you put that. I want to ask you quickly one thing. You have as a principle on your site is family. That's the principle of the Constitution Party. And so what do you mean by that? And what would you do to promote strong families and a struggle for particularly millennials and younger generation, affordable family formation?
Yeah, I think that the point there is that a lot of the problems in the United States with the newborns all the way up through now is that they don't have a family. I was born into a single parent home myself, so I know what it is not to have a father and to grow up. And I was fortunate that I had older brothers and so forth that sort of commensurated or to helped out with that problem. But if you are get a high school education and don't get married till you're 21 years old and are raised in a family that has two parents, there's only a 2% chance you're going to live in poverty, which means that it's very important. The statistics verify that family is critical to a good upbringing and to high morals and so forth. And so we need to make sure that families stay together. And, we don't want to get in a situation we've been in from time to time where the welfare programs and systems of these states actually encourage a broken up family. And the kids just get on the wrong track, and then it becomes chronic, if you will.
Yeah. Great. I want to move on to entitlements, Don. On your website, you say, quote, "The Constitution grants no authority to the federal government to administrate a social security system. The The Constitution Party advocates phasing out the entire Social Security program while continuing to meet the obligations already incurred under the system until the current Social Security system can be responsibly phased out. Don, you are going after the third rail of American politics. I want to give you a chance to talk, give your stance on Social Security and Medicare, and maybe what if there is another way, hopefully a better way for Americans. So what's your stance, and what's the Constitution Party's plan?
First of all, in the Constitution Party platform, I would emphasize the word phase. It might take 100 years to phase out.
Okay.
So it would take a long time. But ironically, it combines back to your family concept. We need for people to grow up with an equal opportunity, and entitlements and privileges mean that something is being taken away from somebody. You can't, for example, give a privilege to someone based on a religion, a minority, an age, or anything else without taking someone else's right away. Mm-hmm. And you can't expect people to be paying for other people's, quote, entitlements. But you can't get there overnight, because we've got a whole generation of people out there that aren't prepared to work in society, that have been raised in towns that were shooting 59 or 60 people every weekend. Right. So there's a lot of things to be fixed, but they can be fixed. And it takes a combination of everything we're talking about to fix them. We've got to get to the point that we're a rule of law. We've got to get to the point that people have equal opportunity, not equal pay. There's a big difference between saying you want equal pay or you want equal this or equal that versus equal opportunity to earn the pay. And we've gotten way off track. I look at my campaign in the third way as putting the country back on track and eventually making it great again by returning to our foundations and the Constitution.
Great. Don, you're as you mentioned earlier, you're the CEO of a large coal producer, so you're certainly familiar with the energy sector. And now the U.S. is now the number one oil producer in the world. But some on the other side want what they call a Green New Deal, which will eliminate oil, gas, coal production. So the question to you, Don: should the United States have an energy policy, and what should that policy be?
Well, let me say, first of all, and hopefully you're Green Party guys listening, that the environmental movement is not based on it being a big cause. It's a big business. The environmental movement provides tremendous income for people. It's made Al Gore famous and rich. Uh-huh. It's not many times what they represent it to be. My view of technology and doing away with coal or oil and so forth is that the market will take care of that given time. It's fair to regulate pollution if it's real pollution and have that be in the cost of oil or gas or coal or whatever. And when wind or solar or other technologies are able to replace it in the marketplace, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But the idea that we're going to give Nancy Pelosi's in-laws or part of her family $400 million to build solar panels, and suddenly they go broke a few years later, it has to be done away with. The subsidies, you can pick up your power bill in some of these states and it'll actually have on there a subsidy for solar or subsidy for wind, all these different things. And it makes no sense, because while the people in D.C. or the people who are wealthy like George Soros and others can advocate that we should be on a green program, the problem is most people can't afford it unless we run a $27 trillion debt and give everybody money.
Now, even in California, which is probably one of the states you're maybe referring to, I mean, they're having trouble just keeping the lights on over the summer, and they're trying to do green stuff, right? Would that be one of the cases you were talking about?
Now, California is one of the worst, but the country in general has been bad. To give you some numbers that you can that cause you to understand, so people can understand. In 1980, these are directional; they're not exact. But in 1980, the United States and China were producing about the same amount of coal, 1 billion tons apiece. 30 years later, China was producing 4 billion tons of coal, 3 billion more, and the United States was producing 20% less, around 800 million. The EPA and the green movement in the United States thinks that they help the environment. The fact of the matter is that the burn of coal around the world skyrocketed, and it skyrocketed in countries that had no environmental controls, no controls over sulfur, NOx, arsenic, mercury, or anything else. Other nonsensical things they do. We were emitting as a country about 40 40 tons of mercury. And the Chinese were emitting like 4,000 tons of mercury. So, we were spending trillions of dollars trying to get rid of 40 tons of mercury. If you want to do a cost-benefit analysis, you could go to China and put on environmental controls and reduce worldwide pollution by 50 times, as much. So they're not really concerned about the environment. If they were, they would be putting regulations on Chinese production rather than U.S. production.
Fantastic point. All right, so that's sort of the philosophy, sort of where you stand and where the party stands. I want to hit on just a couple of things that are in the news right now. One of them is as Republicans and Democrats are negotiating again to do another round of stimulus for COVID-19 economic relief, and the president issued 4 executive orders, basically bypassing Congress when they couldn't come to an agreement. What would a Don Blankenship administration do right now? What would be your stance in terms of further economic relief? How would you respond to these to these talks where it seems like we're getting another couple of $1 trillion probably within the next few weeks potentially?
I don't know if I could throw out an exact number of the stimulus. I do think we're in a situation that's it would be far less than the 2 or the 3. It might be 500 billion, but the problem that we have goes back to the same thing. There's no truth in the coronavirus. Nobody knows what the truth is. The truth is it's invisible as the virus itself. So we don't really know what to do. Early on, we should have isolated the people in New York in order to keep it from spreading around the country. We allowed places in the United States that were highly infected, people to travel everywhere, while we wouldn't allow Europeans to come in the country. And the virus spreads the same whether you're European or New Yorker or whatever.
Right.
So we need to first analyze what's going on. I think the numbers are such that my guess would be that people under 50 or under 55 should just go back to work. That's the first stimulus package. You just send everybody back to work that is healthy and able to work and young enough that they can stand, being positive on the virus. Mm-hmm. Then you make sure that the people that are elderly and disabled are taken care of. You don't move people that are testing positive into nursing homes. What they've done is so nonsensical. It would be easy to do far better than they do, but to do a really, really good job, you'd need to know some facts. And right now, the facts just aren't available. I'm shocked that we're paying hospitals to declare people positive for coronavirus, and surprised that we're getting a lot of positive tests.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what about a vaccine? That's another topic. Russia announced that they had one, but we're not really even sure if that's true or not, or if it, if it's going to be any good. The current administration, the Trump administration, is throwing money at anyone who says they can make a vaccine. Just sort of spreading the money around on trying basically a moonshot to get one. If there is one that that apparently goes through the trials and is approved, what would you say about potentially mandating everyone take a vaccine, or maybe for kids to go to school? How do you see a COVID-19 vaccine? Should this be something that should be encouraged to be widespread, potentially mandated?
It's another one. It's like the Seattle thing. It's a tough one because to do it within the Constitution is hard, and not to do it opens up a lot of possible problems. I think that you can't mandate it. You have to make it voluntary. And then you may be able to do some things that if you don't take it, maybe there's some restrictions on your travel or whatever, but you can't mandate that somebody take a vaccination. Yeah.
Okay, now I want to hit on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You had something else?
I'm sorry. That's the one aspect of it I'm sure of. The rest of it, again, they would have to have more information.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. So it is certainly a tricky one, and we don't even know. Well, the vaccine doesn't even exist yet, so we're still speculating on that. Looking ahead to November, Don, the mail-in voting has been contentious. There's some conspiracy theories about the president stealing mailboxes. I think the confidence in an accurate election in November is not very high, and then people are worried about going out and voting in person. All that. What would you do to make our election system safe and secure and credible?
Well, the first thing, going back to my bean counter thing again, the post office service was wanting $50 per envelope to mail it from within the state. So it doesn't make any sense if you look at 120 million people vote, and you look at they want whatever it is, $15 billion, and they got to mail it each way. The number is just outrageous. but I think what we have to do is look at what Washington's been doing, because Washington and Oregon claim they've got a fair system that is basically relying on mailing. I do think that it's going to be hard to require everybody to go to a poll, to a voting poll with some of them elderly and so forth and afraid of the virus.
Right.
So I think we're going to have some mailing. I think we need to get some people with brains together and with good intentions and try to figure out how to make it as likely fair as they can. But obviously you mail a ballot into somebody's home that's got 2 adult children at home and 3 or 4 friends next door that never vote and so forth. A guy might get 8 or 10 votes. So it's both sides again are lying about it. I mean, Trump is rightfully concerned that you could have multiple people could get multiple votes, and that people could go around and gather up election ballots and mail them in. The Democrats are rightfully concerned that you want everybody to have a chance to vote. But instead of working on the problem, they're trying to make publicity out of it and win favor instead of trying to create a fair election.
Yep, and that gets to the heart of everything we've been talking about so far. Now, if people want to vote for Don Blankenship, if they want to vote the third way for a Constitution Party, there's the issue of ballot access. Where do you stand now on the states? And if people want to help you get on the ballot, if you're not on the ballot in their state, what can they do?
Well, I don't keep up with it every day. We did get on a lot of ballots. We weren't able to get on in California, even though you can't get within 6 foot of someone to get a petition signed. So I don't know how they expect you to get on the ballot, but I think we could use some volunteers in Minnesota and a few other places to get petitions signed, but we've worked it really hard. For me, quite frankly, this year has been a learning experience. A lot of this stuff I didn't have a lot of familiarity with because I've been a lifetime Republican. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't recognize the difficulties and so forth. But in 4 years from now, maybe even in the midterms, I think we can do a lot better job, particularly if there's not a virus keeping us from getting signatures.
Absolutely. Don, last question. Why should Americans vote Don Blankenship?
Well, because the other 2 choices aren't nearly as good at this as I am. They just talk. They don't know what they're doing. Trump is a promoter. He means well. He definitely understands that the establishment is a bad thing. He understands that other countries are running off and leaving us on infrastructure. They've got bullet trains, better airports, and they're catching up with us technologically, and he's afraid. They like to refer on the left to angry white men. He's a scared white man. There's a lot of them out there that are scared that we're going to go back to being a country that is like many of the countries that we deplore. So Biden has, of course, been up there for forever. He's not going to make any meaningful changes because he is very much part of the establishment. I'm not part of the establishment. I understand it because I was born in the poorhouse and moved, if you will, into the rich man's house and everywhere in between. I've even been in the big house. So there's a lot of experiences that I have that no one else out there will ever have, fortunately. And those experiences can allow me or would allow me to do a very good job for the American people.
Excellent, Don. And of course, everyone can head on over to www.donblankenship.com if they want to learn more about you, learn more about your party, if they want to donate or learn how to volunteer. Don, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on, and I wish you the best of luck in November.
Thank you. Don't waste your vote on the major parties.
Well, that was my discussion with Don Blankenship, of course, of the Constitution Party. And as I said before, you can head on over to www.donblankenship.com. I had a great time talking to him. He's a smart guy. He certainly has his principles, and what better principles, I guess, to have than the Constitution, right? The supreme law of the land. It was great getting his perspective on how to this third way that he talked about and breaking the stranglehold that Republicans and Democrats have. You don't have to just choose Republicans and Democrats. And as Don said at the end, don't throw your vote away for someone who's not going to really change anything. And withhold, and as I said out of the Howie Hawkins interview, withholding your vote from Republicans and Democrats may be the most powerful thing you could do come November 3rd. So go out there and make your informed American decision. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I would be honored if you would hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. And also, I would encourage you to head on over to informedamerican.com, where you can get real smart news in your inbox. Thanks so much for watching.